So earlier this week, I put out a video responding to the recently enacted anti-trans legislation in the state of Florida and just the general anti-trans movement that has been ascendant these last several years. And I looked at it specifically from the point of view of this inability that a lot of conservatives and right-wing people have to just mind their own fucking business when it comes to other people who just want to privately live out their lives and go about their business while harming no one and affecting no one else's life. And the question at the center of the video was basically if a trans person, even a trans child, let's say a trans child, and that child's parents and that child's doctors all agree that some form of gender-affirming care is appropriate for this child and will help improve this child's quality of life, and they all make that decision together, how is it anybody else's business? How is it the business of some right-wing dipshit on Twitter or YouTube or the Daily Wire or whatever? How is it the state's business? It really shouldn't be, should it? And that, you would think, would be completely consistent with the values that conservatives claim to have, that the government should be keeping its nose out of other people's business. Well, I guess except if we're talking about trans people. And of course, predictably, there were some transphobic comments left on that video, and I've been deleting those and banning the people who make them. So if you would like to waste a few seconds or minutes of your life, please feel free to leave a transphobic comment on that video or this video, and I will be happy to delete that and ban your shit too, because I don't give a fuck. You're not welcome here. But there was this one comment among all of those transphobic comments that I've been deleting that jumped out at me, and it was basically someone saying to me, oh, sure, you're supportive of trans rights now, but let's see how you would feel after your son deprived you of your legacy by castrating himself just because it was the cool thing to do or just because it was the fatty thing to do or something like that. And I thought, boy, is that revealing in all sorts of ways. I mean, first of all, it exhibits this really wrong-headed, ignorant, misleading attitude about what is going on when trans kids receive gender-affirming care. Like, there were a lot of people who were leaving comments to that video and to when I posted it on Twitter where they were saying like, oh, so we make kids wait until they're 16 to be able to drive a car, and they can't join the military or vote until they're 18, and they can't drink alcohol until they're 21, but they should be allowed to decide to have surgery that will radically alter their bodies for the rest of their lives when they're 11 or 12. And it's like, no, nobody's saying that. Nobody that I am aware of has ever suggested that children that young should be legally empowered to just decide for themselves to have something like gender reassignment surgery or to have any other kind of medical treatment. Like, they're still minors. They're still kids. They don't have any more giving gender affirming care to kids and recognizing the existence and the dignity and the rights and the equality of trans kids doesn't give them any more legal rights than cis kids would have in terms of their health care and their health decisions. But if a child is trans, if a child exhibits all the signs and genuinely identifies as the gender other than the one they were assigned at birth, and their parents are completely on board with it, and their doctors are completely on board with it, what is the problem? Unless you're a transphobe and you just think that trans people shouldn't be allowed to do that, like, or shouldn't be supported. Like, what is the problem? So that was one thing in the comment, but I've seen that in lots of other places. But it's this idea of if you have what you think is a son, and then it turns out your son is actually your daughter because they're trans. And let's say that at some stage in their life, whether it's when they're in their teen years or in their adult years or whatever, however old they are, let's say that your child that you thought of as your son, but is actually your trans daughter, has a gender confirming surgery that leaves them in a condition where they are no longer able to impregnate somebody else and sire a child, right? Let's just say that happens. Again, how's that any of your business? Nobody asks to be born. And when we are not born with a job. And we are certainly not born with the job of continuing the family line, whether we want to or not. That's not the deal. And if you as a parent think that is the deal, you've got another thing coming. Now, if you have a child and your child grows up and decides to have children of their own and your family line is perpetuated, hey, great. As long as everybody's on board with that and that's what everybody wants, and congratulations, good for you. But how dare you put that on your child as an expectation and act like you're some kind of a victim if it turns out you have a trans child who wants to transition in a way that will prevent them from having kids the natural way, the biological way, like as though they're taking something away from you that you're owed. No, they're not. And by the way, even if you have cis kids who decide not to have children of their own for whatever reason they have, or for no reason at all, you have been robbed of nothing that you are entitled to. You don't create kids and then enlist them into the army of continuing your genetics, of perpetuating your family line. That's their choice if they want to do that, not yours as the parent. And you have no right to expect that and no right to put that on your fucking kids and to hold it against them if they decide to do something else with their lives that doesn't include becoming a biological parent to a child for whatever reason. And on that note about biological parent, let's say that you do have a child that was assigned male at birth and then later in life transitions and comes out as a trans woman and is no longer able to biologically have children. But let's say they decide to adopt a child. Does that not count? Are you really saying that it's not a part of your legacy? It doesn't count as your legacy? If it's an adopted child, it has to be a blood child? Are we living in medieval times here? It has to be a blood child. It has to be of the bloodline. Is that what you're saying? Are you also saying, in saying that the only part of your legacy that means anything to you is the part that is passed on through your bloodline? Is the part that is stored in your genetics? Is there nothing of value to you other than what is stored in your DNA that you inherited from your parents? That's the only part about you that has any value? Your genes? Your bloodline? There's nothing about your experience? There's nothing about your worldview? Oh, and actually, there probably is nothing about your worldview, hypothetical transphobe, that I'm addressing here. But is there nothing about your life experience? Nothing about how you see the world? Nothing about things you've been through? Nothing about your own personality, your own likes and dislikes, your knowledge, your wisdom that you could pass on and make a legacy out of that and pass that on to an adopted grandchild, let's say, someone who does not share your genetics, who is not a close biological relative of yours, who did not spring from the loins of one of your biological children, but is still a child in your family, a chosen child, someone who has been adopted and welcomed into your family, and who presumably your kids or your child, who is the parent of this child, loves very much and considers their family just as if they were their own flesh and blood. That there's nothing of a legacy that you could pass on to that child. It's all in the genetics. It's all in the bloodline. Everything about you of any value is contained in your blood. And there's nothing about you as a person, as you grew up, as you experienced the world, as you became who you are. There's nothing about that unique individual that you think needs to be passed on or that you want to share with the next generation. It's all in the bloodline. It tells me pretty much everything I need to know about you, and tells me that I definitely don't need to feel the least bit bad about deleting your comment and banning you, so that if you do manage to find other platforms, and I'm sure you will, where you can spew that hatred and that ignorance and that bile, at least you won't be able to do it here. And I can know that and sleep like a fucking baby tonight.